Sometimes prosperity feels like a horizon that never quite arrives. You take steps, make conscious choices, work hard, and still, there's this feeling that abundance is always almost there, as if something invisible, subtle but real, keeps life in a loop of survival. Perhaps you know this feeling intimately, a silent tightness in the chest when bills pile up, when opportunities slip through your fingers, when life quietly says, "Not yet." But what if what blocks abundance from blooming isn't on the... Napoleon Hill said, "Thought, when it becomes belief, transforms into reality." But what few people realize is that true belief doesn't need proof. It operates in silence. It doesn't ask for validation. It doesn't announce itself. It simply is. And from that inner certainty, a new world begins to form around you. Neville Goddard taught that you don't manifest what you desire. You manifest what you assume to be true. It's not the desire that attracts. It's the identity you embody. And what we call a mindset that attracts wealth automatically is not a formula. It's a state of coherence, a silent internal harmony between emotion, identity, and vibration. Many people live in a state of constant effort to prosper, but deep inside carry the frequency of lack. They say the right words, visualize the right things, but still feel that abundance is always just out of reach. The result? Fatigue, frustration, a deep longing to enter a state where prosperity is no longer a struggle, but simply a natural extension of who they are. That's the turning point. The moment you stop fighting to receive and begin living as if you've already received. When your energy no longer begs for abundance but begins to vibrate in tune with it. And the universe listens, because the mind that attracts wealth automatically doesn't shout. It whispers truth with consistency. There are desires born from the heart, yet drowned out by silent vibrations of fear. The mind says, "I want to prosper," but the body vibrates urgency, tension, survival. And when that happens, what manifests isn't what you want, but what you emit. Many believe that wanting is enough, that thinking positively each day will guarantee change. But Hill warned us, desire alone is not enough. You must emotionalize your mental image, infuse it with practical faith, with direction, with feeling. The mind that attracts wealth automatically is not the one that desires most. It's the one that calmly feels, "This is already mine." As long as wealth feels distant, the mind will continue to operate from a place of lack. And that vibration creates more of the same. More delay, more waiting, more struggle. The desire moves forward, but the frequency holds it back. And soon, that waiting becomes the atmosphere of your life. Only when you begin to live internally as someone already prosperous, not out of arrogance but from vibrational coherence, will the field around you begin to change. Because what attracts isn't how much you want, it's how much you align with what you say you want. If there is too much effort, it's a sign that a part of you still doesn't believe. That part must be seen, listened to, and re-educated. Because the mind that vibrates effort, even while speaking of abundance, remains energetically rooted. Scarcity isn't always about a lack of resources. Sometimes it's rooted in a belief, a deeply embedded idea that says, "If I didn't suffer for it, I don't deserve it." This belief lives in the body, in the emotions, in the way you unconsciously react when something good happens without struggle. It's the discomfort that arises when things flow too easily. There is a subtle identity, almost invisible, built around effort. An emotional attachment to the belief that only through sacrifice is something valuable. Hill called this negative autosuggestion. These are the quiet phrases repeated inside your mind without awareness. Nothing comes easy. I have to fight for everything. If I didn't struggle for it, it has no value. These thoughts sabotage abundance. Even when life offers something gently, your system pushes it away, resists, closes off. Because internally ease still feels suspicious, and so the pattern returns. More struggle, more control, more tension. Prosperity, which could have arrived naturally, is blocked by the unconscious belief that it must be earned through pain. To attract wealth automatically, the mind must disconnect from the identity of effort. It must open to a new internal agreement. That ease can also be sacred. That flow can also be honorable. That you are allowed to receive, even when it didn't hurt to get there. And once that internal permission is granted, prosperity no longer needs to knock, because the door is already open. You can imagine a prosperous life every day. You can visualize wealth, beautiful homes, financial peace, meaningful conversations, and freedom. You can repeat affirmations with intensity and discipline. But if, deep down, you still feel undeserving, unworthy, or emotionally distant from the life you imagine, nothing changes. The mind creates the image, but it's your emotional identity that gives it substance. Many become frustrated with visualization because they confuse imagination with manifestation. They believe that seeing the image is enough to bring it to life. But as Neville Goddard said, you do not attract what you imagine. You attract what you feel to be true. And feeling something as true goes far beyond repeating phrases. It means emotionally living the scene, as if it were already your most natural state. When you visualize wealth but still feel incompatible with it, what occurs is a vibrational break. The image goes in one direction, but your energy remains in another. This incoherence leads to frustration. You believe you are doing everything right, but nothing shifts. Because the universe doesn't respond to effort, it responds to emotional truth. The mind that attracts wealth automatically doesn't live in hope, it lives in frequency. It doesn't chase an outcome, it anchors an identity. This isn't a performance, it's presence. When your emotional body begins to accept wealth as natural, when it no longer resists receiving, then what you see inside aligns with what life mirrors back to you. The image manifests because something in you has finally stopped doubting. There's a significant difference between desiring something and internally living as if that thing already belongs to you, and it is within that space, between wanting and being, that real manifestation begins. Not because you're trying to force the world to respond, but because you've chosen to inhabit the frequency of what you once chased. Step 1 is simple but powerful. Choose a scene, a small ordinary moment that symbolizes your abundant life already in motion. Perhaps you're calmly discussing a new project with someone. Maybe it's a peaceful morning enjoying coffee in your dream home. Maybe it's your loved one smiling as you share good news. What matters is that the scene feels emotionally authentic and natural. Step 2, live the scene within, from the inside, in first person. Don't look at yourself from outside. Be there. Don't focus on achieving something. Focus on feeling it as normal, as expected, as familiar. The more natural it feels, the more powerfully it reprograms your energy field, because the subconscious doesn't respond to fantasy, it responds to repetition and emotional reality. Step 3, return to this scene daily, not with the urgency of someone waiting for a result, but as someone reaffirming a state already assumed. Don't ask, don't expect, just embody. Let your nervous system learn what it feels like to live as someone for whom abundance is simply home. Over time, this practice stops being a technique and becomes a frequency. And when that happens, the world begins to echo what your inner field has already accepted. Not because you begged, but because you believed, calmly, confidently, silently. Imagine a radio. You might have the most powerful equipment, the best antenna, the strongest desire to hear a specific song, but if you're tuned to the wrong frequency, all you'll hear is noise, confusion, something that doesn't match what you were hoping for. Prosperity functions the same way. It's a frequency. It doesn't respond to effort. It responds to tuning. It's not enough to want more money, to declare abundance, or to read about wealth. If your inner signal is still tuned to fear, unworthiness, or exhaustion, you'll receive feedback that matches that exact station. Napoleon Hill taught that the mind is both a transmitter and a receiver. You don't just think, you emit. You don't just dream, you vibrate. And what you vibrate is what finds you. The field doesn't speak your words, it speaks your frequency. The mind that attracts wealth automatically has learned to transmit the right signal, not through loud affirmations, not through forced positivity, but through quiet conviction, through emotional coherence. It emits a silent frequency that says, prosperity lives here, and the field responds. You don't need to beg for wealth. You don't need to prove yourself worthy. You simply need to tune in to the version of yourself that already lives in ease, that walks without fear, that breathes with trust. That tuning is done through inner consistency. And once that station is set, wealth finds you not as a gift but as a return. There's a kind of action that's quiet, subtle. It doesn't look like effort. It doesn't look like desperation. It's born not from urgency, but from alignment. This is the action that flows from the state of already being. And this is the kind of action that manifests. Many people confuse activity with productivity. They move constantly. They make plans, force outcomes, chase opportunities, but inside there's still a frequency of fear, of lack, of I must do this or I'll lose everything. And this internal urgency contaminates the action. It becomes seeking dressed up as discipline. Hill warned us, action without direction is wasted energy. True power, he said, comes from action guided by a clear plan and definite faith. When you act out of anxiety, what you're really projecting is, something is missing. And the field mirrors that. What returns to you is more delay, more struggle, more need to control. But there is another way, the action that comes from a place of already having, of already being. This action is not loud. It doesn't always look ambitious. It doesn't scream for attention. But it is infused with internal certainty. Every step confirms what your vibration already assumes. Abundance is here, not coming, not conditional, present. That kind of action is almost invisible to the eyes of the world, but it's unmistakable to the quantum field, because it carries no resistance, no tension, just coherence. You're no longer running towards something, you're walking with it, and that changes everything. There's a misconception that the higher your vibration, the louder or more euphoric it must be, but true power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it simply rests in certainty. The mind that attracts wealth automatically doesn't need to be constantly excited. It needs to be emotionally congruent. Neville and Hill, each in their own language, pointed to the same truth. Your point of power is the feeling of already being who you claim to be. That feeling doesn't require fireworks. It doesn't demand proof. It's quiet, grounded, stable, and that stability is what makes the field respond. Vibrational neutrality isn't apathy, it's trust. It's the emotional frequency that no longer needs to convince, because it already convinced the soul. You're no longer trying to make something happen. You're allowing it to unfold from a place of inner readiness. When you combine that neutrality with emotional direction, a heart that knows where it's going, and a mind that no longer doubts, you begin to emit a frequency that is magnetic, not because it pulls, but because it aligns, not because it chases, but because it receives. At that point, abundance doesn't need to knock. It walks in through a door that was always open, but only now recognized as home. Napoleon Hill taught that wealth does not come to those who simply want it, but to those who decide with internal clarity and do not waver emotionally. This is the hidden root behind what looks like luck or automatic success. It is not a mystery, it is coherence. Florence Scovel Shinn said, "You attract what you accept with faith, not what you merely affirm in fear." And there's great wisdom in that, because your mind can repeat a phrase 1,000 times, but if your nervous system still trembles with doubt, nothing moves. You manifest not what you say, but what you live in silence. What many call automatic attraction is, in truth, a reorganized internal field, a mind that no longer negotiates with lack, a soul that no longer begs for permission to receive, a vibration that no longer asks, but rests. The mindset that attracts wealth automatically is not magical. It is mature. It is a state that no longer seeks signs, but becomes the sign, no longer searches for validation, because it has already accepted itself as worthy. And from that place, wealth stops being a prize to pursue. It becomes the natural consequence of who you are. And what if everything you've been seeking was already waiting for you but within you? What if abundance wasn't something to conquer, but something to allow? Maybe you've spent years chasing something that only needed to be welcomed. Maybe the fight was never against lack, but against your own resistance to ease. Maybe all this time the universe was whispering, not try harder, but let go. The mind that attracts wealth automatically is not the one that does the most. It's the one that stops resisting, that releases the identity of struggle, that walks without noise, but with presence. Because true prosperity is not loud. It arrives with the same softness as a clear morning, with the same grace as a river finding the sea. Nothing changes outside, until something shifts within. And when it does, life begins to mirror that shift. The timing changes. The opportunities clarify. The path opens, not because of luck, but because you finally stopped begging and began to live as someone who already received. This is the turning point. When wanting becomes being, when effort becomes alignment, and when the frequency of I am ready finally echoes through the field as truth, and from there everything flows.